a lot of e-com operators don't see supply chain as a growth lever. They see it more of a pain point which has to be solved. What I see, and many supply chain listeners will probably agree here, supply chain is a key enabler for future growth, especially when e-com brands want to scale. Getting the right real-time decisions, having the right safety stock, having the forecasts right and aligned with all the stakeholders is super important.
Welcome to Blue Ocean by StartOps. In this show, we talk about the problems faced by modern supply chain, logistics, finance and CX leaders, and the tools and techniques they're using to solve them. Each episode, I sit down with an e-commerce operator or founder at the front lines of operations and try to gather as much information and tactical wisdom from them as possible to share with you. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. I'm Charles Cushing, the founder of StartOps. Joining me here today is Leon Hergert, the co-founder and CEO of Spherecast. Welcome, Leon.
Charles, thanks for having me today.
I first just wanted to say a quick congrats. I heard you guys were recently accepted into the summer batch of YC. What are you most looking forward to doing in San Francisco when you get there?
We feel super excited. When we got the call from our group partner, it was a moment I will forever remember, I think. And we're excited to learn from people who've done this before. Our group partner has built 2 unicorn companies before. So people who've done everything, the whole journey, which is in front of us, is super exciting and we're looking forward to it.
That's awesome. Have you ever been to SF before?
We have been. Actually, a year ago, we visited with some people there, saw the kind of ambition founders have there. It's definitely different to what we're used to here in Germany. Even though we're in a very ambitious startup hub here in Munich, I feel like San Francisco was still a different vibe.
Yeah, it's other level over there. First of all, for those who are not familiar with Spherecast, what is it? What do you guys do and what problems are you solving?
So Spherecast is an inventory co-pilot for multi-channel e-commerce brands. We help with demand planning, replenishment, and inventory optimization, which avoid stockouts and overstock situations, increase visibility, and especially save time for supply chain ops managers.
Awesome. All right, that's a great description. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into sort of specifics there. But before we get into that, I want to just sort of take it back to the beginning for a second and then work back to present day. So would you mind sharing just a quick background? Who are you and how did you get to the point where, you were going to be ready to start this company?
Yeah, sure. So quick background on me academically, I have a background in information systems from the Technical University of Munich and technology management from CTM, also an add-on degree here in Munich. Looking back, the first station, which I always love to remember in my head, was an internship at Lufthansa Technik in Beijing. So it was my kind of first supply chain station. And there my task was bring more data into supply chain day to day. So basically that means imagine an airplane arriving in Beijing and now potentially needs a repair. And then the question arrives, do we have everything on stock? Can we repair it on time until the plane flies back to Frankfurt, for example? And think about all the Chinese airports. This was a very, very interesting optimization problem, and seeing the status quo there and what impact technology could make and made actually also on supply chain day to day was super amazing for me, actually. I always think about the great time where I was there from a experience standpoint. And after the station, I continued with my bachelor's degree in information system. And then at the end of my bachelor's, I saw logistics startup, so a venture-backed fulfillment provider, and saw e-commerce logistics next to aviation logistics basically. And there I talked with some brands on their problems. And again, it was, inventory planning, supply chain planning. I have a headache there. For me, it was, okay, I've seen this problem before somewhere, different supply chain kind of, but problem was very similar. And I've seen a startup too, which was super exciting for me. I came to Munich for my master's degree, and here I met my co-founders. And basically I said, hey guys, I have something which follows me through my whole life. Let's just explore this further. We have to, So we did. We explored. And then last year, August, we decided to go full-time.
That's awesome. Kind of seeing the same pattern in different environments and getting the inkling that maybe there's something here. What did your sort of exploratory period look like and how did it last? I'm always interested in this sort of genesis moment where you get to the point of conviction where you're like, okay, there's actually enough of something here that we can build a company.
I'll give you kind of an unsatisfying answer here because we were exploring the space next to our studies and we kind of talked to people, but we really had issues of kind of seeing patterns because for us, it was like inventory planning e-commerce. what's e-commerce, smaller shops or, 100 million brands. I think the pivotal moment for us was when we actually went full time on this, because we had some users we talked to, we had some prototypes, but we said, well, we just need to go full time on this. And I think force us to really have conversations, sell to people, build our product even faster. And I think this was the pivotal moment where in August, Paul and I just on a day-to-day basis built product, cold called people, and then kind of patterns emerged, right? Okay, this brand has this many warehouses, this many channels, similar pain points to this one. Let's just iterate quickly here, show them our designs. And this was super fast when we did it full time. And from a process, it always looked like, well, we had a user conversation, we showed them our Figma mockup. It was also a feeling where there were pulls out of what they saw. And I think with that, we built lines of code, we prototyped, and then give it to users and then see what they do with it. And these were the most of the learnings we've done over time, just building quickly, talking to as many as possible, because it forces you to find patterns.
That's really cool. Yeah, it sounds like it was a very sort of organic exploration. You weren't forcing anything to happen. It was just hearing the demand over and over again.
Definitely.
So obviously there's inventory planning software out there. How do you guys see the market landscape such that, you're able to find a gap? Like, who's the kind of customer who's out there, they're looking for the right tool and they're not finding it? Like, why do you think this niche exists?
You're definitely right. There's other inventory planning solutions on the market. And from our learnings, where we saw most of the pain points was in setups where there was inventory complexity on another level. I'll give an example. We have double-digit turnover. We have multiple sales channels, but we also have multiple warehouses. So then the question arises, okay, how do I go from forecasting to what is my cash outflow from my business? So planning replenishment, and replenishment is not only ordering from your suppliers, but also sending into other warehouses. And what implications does that have on cash flow? And I think the whole value chain, when I talked about visibility, there was no visibility for most of the brands which have the setup. It's always kind of distributed. ERP system left, Excel sheet there, kind of WMS from the fulfiller there. This was the setup where most of the issues arise, and that's kind of our target market too. So inventory complexity, high turnover, plus we have a supply chain team in place. So people who top of mind are dealing with those challenges on a day-to-day basis. And I think multi-channel, multi-warehouse is our sweet spot.
All right, cool. I think a great way to sort of understand a complex tool, like yours without using it is just to talk through a case study. What does this actually unlock for a customer? I'd love it if you could sort of talk us through for one of your customers, as much detail as you can share. What kind of company was it? What was their situation before they started using Spherecast? What were you guys able to unlock for them?
That's a great question. I'll give you an example of one of our basically first users. From a setup supply chain team, double-digit million turnover, 3 sales channels and 2 warehouses. So think about, Shopify, Amazon is a marketplace, and also a specialized marketplace for supplements. So they have to think about 3 sales channels, so forecast on 3 different sales channels. And from the warehouse side of things, they have one central 3PL where, goods from the supplier arrive, but also goods have to be sent into Amazon. So if you think about it from a forecasting perspective, 3 channels, and from a warehouse side, 2 warehouses where you have to fulfill demand on each channel. Then they have to link demand from basically Amazon FBA products to the FBA warehouse, but FBM products to the 3PL. So things get more complex already on the linking side of things. They also have an SKU count of over 800, basically over 800 SKUs they have to look at. And one ERP system. Status quo was also no real safety stock, no real visibility into when they should reorder and how much, because the data was stuck in the ERP kind of, and it had to, they had to download the data, put it in an Excel sheet, get the amount on another Excel sheet, put it kind of together to see, okay, this is my days of inventory and I have this lead time-ish, and then this is my reorder point, which always emerged in stock. So we kind of did a calculation with them. They had $950K in lost revenue in 2023 before they used us, because it was so messy and painful for them of getting all the processes and data together.
And just to be clear, which modules are happening inside the software versus are pulling in data from elsewhere? So for example, like sales forecast, do you guys have something where you can generate a sales forecast? Is it pulling in from another system? Is it, manual input from maybe a spreadsheet calculation someone's done on the side? What are the key components that you've actually built?
So I'll just walk you through our key components. Spherecast consists of a dashboard where you see all your main KPIs I've just talked about, right? Like, for example, profitability, for example, inventory value. The other one is replenishment. On one view, you see when to reorder and how much of your products, and when to send in your products to Amazon or other warehouses and how much of these on top. And then planning, which is kind of the base for replenishment decisions. So the forecasting side of things, that's where we provide a forecasting engine for our users. So they get a baseline forecast for every SKU, and they have an easy time to measure the forecast accuracy and also adjust the forecast based on their own inputs. If they plan to launch a marketing campaign, they could put it on top of their forecast, and then this gets translated directly into the replenishment or sent in decisions. So everything's interconnected. The other section of our software is cash flow. If you think about it, I have a forecast. These are my purchase order and shipment decisions. How much will it cost me based on my payment terms with my suppliers and based on the purchase order volume? So at what time do I have what cash outflow? Super important to not run into cash flow issues, to have visibility over the next months. Most of the value add was also happening there when we onboarded people where they actually had visibility into the interconnection. And the last part, analytics. How reliable are my suppliers? One important aspect. If you always think about lead times and you're run your calculation with a lead time of 30, 40, 50 days, but your supplier always underperforms, always late, then there's a risk. There's this delta which you're not considering, where again, out of stock risk, right? Out of stock risk is happening on demand and supply side. And that's where our users can also see what is happening on the supply chain side.
One last sort of clarifying question on this. What are the data sources that most of your users are connecting? Like, what's feeding into this to generate that data?
So we're connecting to the main shop systems, which are Shopify, Amazon natively with basically our API. And then we also connect to certain ERP systems, right? So, one famous example is NetSuite. People have NetSuite now. Okay, what do we do with NetSuite data? I have my POs there, but kind of my sales data there, but my decision-making still is, unfulfilled from this product or for most of the ERP systems.
So someone's like getting their POs via email and they don't have a proper ERP setup or another tool, you guys can ingest those as well.
Definitely. So that's where we kind of have this too, where people don't have an ERP and now they can place POs in our system. If they already have an ERP in place, then we just write into the ERP system directly. So we kind of orchestrate the ERP from above if you want to have an illustration there.
Right. That makes sense. All right. I want to shift gears here into just some of the learnings that you've had while building this company. First of all, I love your user-focused approach to building this. At this point, you've talked to dozens, if not hundreds of operators who are facing these challenges. What would you say is like the most interesting or unexpected thing that you've observed about how mid-market e-commerce business today is doing their inventory planning?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I've mentioned before. So two things. One is underutilizing what comes after demand variance, or if I cannot forecast products well because, sales data looks very messy. I talked about it, dynamic safety stock. I think it's very important to nail that. And I see most of the brands don't do that. Because getting forecast accuracy right is extremely important. You need to be better at forecasting, which is a process perspective, and you have this technical perspective, right? I can forecast sales better because I substitute stockouts well. I see seasonality automatically. I see growth rate as automatically. But from a process perspective, it's also, hey, am I aligned with my team on what marketing campaigns we push next week or next month? And then if I capture forecast accuracy with tech and process well enough, then I need to think about, okay, what do I do with the variance which is still uncaptured, right? Like nobody has 100% forecast accuracy, which is fine. How do you handle this though? And I think that's the missing piece, what we see, that people don't actually have a plan for this. And that's how we support, or if ops and supply chain managers are listening, I think the framework of ABC, XYZ analysis, just like from supply chain academia side, is extremely helpful when streamlining supply chain. So that's what we see helps them most of the time. It's also often like this aha effect, right? Okay, because this is my forecast. What can I do after this? Okay, this is my replenishment and stock implication.
So I'd love to ask you a bit about the role of AI in your product. AI has obviously changed the game for, the entire economy really, but especially for things like supply chain. How are you guys using AI in your product, and how do you generally see, the effect that it's going to have on the industry and on the ecosystem?
That's a great point, Charles. So we're using AI, especially in the time series forecasting part. So in our product, it's called planning. When we create a baseline forecast for every product from our customers, we capture seasonality quite well. We can extract out of stock periods from the data, and we can capture growth rate. And this is especially helpful when it comes to setups where you have a multitude number of SKUs. And I think this is where AI comes into play, especially when it comes to forecasting. Or my hypothesis is that we'll experience a ChatGPT moment for time series forecasting. There's a lot of labs in this F2, which are kind of building on pre-trained time series forecasting models where you can kind of skip the training part. You can skip the get me the data first. I'll just, train the data for a week and then I'll come back. Now you can actually plug and play basically and get forecasts out of it directly. And I think that's a super interesting development where we'll see supply chain will change and will be more efficient when it comes to applications within supply chain.
So it seems like forecasting is going to be getting a lot better. Obviously, you guys are already sort of dynamically calculating a lot of the stuff that needs to be done, right? I'm sure a product goal for you is like make the decision as easy as possible. Do you foresee a point in the future where you actually don't even really need a human in the loop to be doing some of these planning and reordering activities?
I would say yes and no. Let's start with the no first, and we'll get back to demand planning. It's naive to think about that, you can just trust the black box system. A software can help you to create a baseline, but it's more important to be aligned with all stakeholders within, an e-com company. I'll have a baseline forecast. What does marketing say about it? Are we pushing some campaigns? Then I need to adjust my forecast on top of that, right? I think demand planning will always be kind of collaborative, but software can help to decrease the collaboration time and alignment. What I think can be fully automated and will happen, which is also part of our vision, is supply chain execution. Given your fixed demand, then your next question is, what should I reorder and how much? And that's kind of a rational optimization problem. Okay, this is my safety stock. Okay, this is my reorder quantity because I fixed demand. This is my current stock levels. These are my future shipments, right? So decision-making is already doable. And then the next step is executing this decision. Okay, I create my PO, send it out to my supplier. My supplier confirms. And I think that's a non-obvious LLM problem there of how large language models can also help automating the rest of the process, which is communicating with the stakeholders, fulfillment providers and suppliers, basically, and executing the decisions. So I would say, to sum it up, demand planning will be collaborative, supply chain will run on autopilot. And that's what we want to shape in this industry.
You mentioned a couple of adjacencies just there, like supplier communication. Is that something you plan to get into? And in fact, what is your vision for Spherecast? What's the scope that you're hoping to bite off in this space?
Supplier communication is definitely on our roadmap, and also fulfillment provider communication. Just think about it. The better I plan, the better I can reorder. But think about it further. The better I as a brand plan, the better my fulfillment provider can plan the workforce. The better the supplier can plan their raw materials reordering. Everyone benefits from better planning and visibility into supply chain. We'd love to enable collaboration between those parties. Our vision for Spherecast is to run supply chain on autopilot. The first point you just mentioned, what can be actually automated? Help people to plan demand collaboratively and then execute the next steps in their supply chain with us.
That's really cool. I hope you guys are able to fulfill that dream. Just kind of going back to the market landscape and what you've been seeing. It is an interesting time to be building a company, again, because AI is reshaping a lot of the forces, the competitive forces that have traditionally determined who gets to participate in the market. And vertical SaaS in particular, I think, has been under a lot of pressure. AI has made it cheaper for smaller players to get started and provide really sort of customized solutions. And then obviously you've got very large companies that have huge data sets that they can train models on and do maybe a better job than a smaller company. You guys are sort of in the middle of that squeeze. Does that worry you at all? And how do you see yourselves being able to compete in a world where, there might be other people trying to do the same things that you're doing?
Great question. I'm not worried in that sense. I think AI is actually democratizing access. The key is integrating into the fragmented space of operations. So not just kind of building a bit of a better NetSuite. I think that won't work. I think integrating tightly into the workflows of a ops and supply chain manager. Think about some products where you have an extremely deep supply chain, right? Where you have raw materials, where we have different suppliers where you need to reorder at one supplier first to get goods to your main supplier so he can assemble it and then send it back to you or your fulfillment provider. These are so important workflows. And I think here still software and understanding these workflows, productizing that is key. And I think that's what we want to do and where we want to be best at. And hence I'm not worried. We just need to play smart of what to integrate with, with whom are we integrate. That's kind of what we think about on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, makes sense. Like you're still solving a specific problem for a specific customer at a specific time. And, AI is not going to like magically make that disappear. One final question, and I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about this. What would you say is your most contrarian belief about supply chain or the way that operators think about supply chain today?
Great question, Charles. Because my learning is that a lot of e-com operators don't see supply chain as a growth lever. They see it more of a pain point which has to be solved. What I see, and many supply chain listeners would probably agree here, supply chain is a key enabler for future growth, especially when e-com brands want to scale. Supply chain decision-making is key here. Getting the right reordering decisions, having the right safety stock, having the forecasts right and aligned with all the stakeholders is super important. Otherwise, you run into cash flow issues. You run into stock out issues, which hurts you, especially in wholesale. Right? If you're stocked out and you're selling to wholesale, it's tricky. And I think that's where stuff changes, or like the key view on supply chain is changing in a very positive direction where we want to be part of. But I think education on this can never stop. We and you're helping with this a lot.
Amazing. And yeah, for what it's worth, I think that's true. The companies that I've seen that have the best sort of sales and operations planning process are often just the best companies. And it is not taken seriously enough by a lot of CEOs and other folks. So hopefully we can continue to push the change there. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Leon. Incredibly excited for you and your team as you go through YC this summer. Remember, you can check out the lessons from this episode and Spherecast verified page on the StartOps directory, and we'll link to that in the show recap. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, Charles.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Blue Ocean. Blue Ocean is produced by StartOps, a growing collection of resources for operations leaders at e-commerce brands. A few of the things we've built include a growing, vendor-free Slack community for operators to ask their most important questions and get answers from trusted peers, a job board that curates jobs from 1,500 modern brands, a media hub that includes this podcast as well as articles and templates on a variety of operations topics, and a comprehensive directory of the software and services used by our community members. If you want to learn more, head to startops.network. And to keep up with the latest information from StartOps or catch the most recent episodes of Blue Ocean, follow the StartOps page on LinkedIn or subscribe to our newsletter. Thanks for listening and hope to catch you next episode.